The Perimeter with Adam Morrison is produced independently and locally in Spokane, Washington by Spokast Studios. Our city, our stories. Visit www.spokast.com to learn more about how you can start your very own podcast today. Thank you to Jinx Universe and Position Music for letting The Perimeter use the song Let's Do It Again from Jinx's album, Make It Look Good.
I want to share a local secret that everyone needs to know about. Owens Farms Piedmontese. For over 35 years, the Owens family has bred and sold a select amount of their premier Piedmontese beef by word of mouth. And now, for the first time, is being made available to the public through our partnership. Go to ofp.farm or click the link in the show description to reserve your half or whole order of premier Piedmontese beef today. There's only a limited amount of Owens Farms Piedmontese beef available, so make sure you don't miss out. The Perimeter with Adam Morrison is proudly presented by Owens Farms Piedmontese. The Perimeter with Adam Morrison is brought to you in sponsorship with Delicious Hamburgers. Did you know Delicious Hamburgers and Fries are the freshest in Spokane? Their hamburgers are never frozen, and that's because it tastes better. There's not even a freezer in the restaurant. Their fries are always made to order and never sit under a heat lamp. It's differences like this you can truly taste. Next time you're craving the freshest hamburgers and fries, head to the corner of Augusta and Division and ask for the Perimeter Combo. A triple delicious hamburger with grilled onions, pickles, and special sauce. It also comes with fries and your choice of a milkshake. Delicious. Taste the difference.
Let me introduce you to the Spokane Workers Co-op, a locally based worker-owned holding company whose mission it is to increase access to living wages, workplace democracy, and autonomy, and to create the sort of lifelong career trajectories that are increasingly uncommon for the majority of people in America. The worker owners of SWC, regardless of which business they work, are equal co-owners of the entire holding company, providing them not just direct ownership of the fruits of their own labor, but ownership in a diversified and resilient portfolio of businesses dedicated to serving Spokane and the Inland Northwest. SWC also buys traditional businesses. SWC buys traditional businesses like LLCs, partnerships, and sole proprietorships, for example, from owners who are ready to retire and who want to make sure the employees who help them build their business are taken care of after the owner leaves. Each week on the Perimeter, we'll introduce a different worker-owned business within the Spokane Workers Co-op. Learn more at www.spokane.coop. And if you're an owner interested in talking about selling, email SWC at team@spokane.coop. That is team@spokane.coop.
Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Turn up the 10. Let's do it again. Let's do it again.
Welcome to Season 2, Episode 1 of The Perimeter, presented by Owens Farms Piedmontese. I have my good friend Tom Hudson with me. Huddy, you were on the last season. We don't need to go through your bio again. It was great. We had a good time.
We did have a good time.
It was like a 3-hour episode. We got whittled it down to 1. I think I had 7 IPAs during that time. But, this season, we're doing more of a recap. It's during the year, obviously. So, you're perfect for, obviously, you know the game, but you call the games. You've done it for 21 years. What, 21 years?
Yeah, 21, yeah.
21.
Yeah.
So, I kind of want to just break down, as the show progresses, upcoming opponents, what's your thoughts? Because I wanted a more analytic, not analytic in the sense of like pure like nerd numbers, but like what's your real thoughts on the season? Because people wanted to, that was the biggest feedback we got. It's like,
Sure.
break down the games, break down what's going to happen.
Right.
So yeah, that's what we're kind of doing this season. So,
Cool.
Obviously the season started with North Florida, 104-63. What else? What's your takeaways from games like that?
Well, Mo, right. I mean, I think I'll say two things. One thing that I think is really fascinating, and give Coach Few a lot of credit for this, and we've talked about this before, is, when you kind of look around the landscape on those opening nights and you see some of those games and you're like, oh, hey, BYU probably should have lost Idaho State that night at home. There were quite a few teams that either lost games. Arizona State lost at Houston Christian the other night. They do a great job of just being ready, right? Because I mean, we're sitting there and that defense is just phenomenal there for that stretch. You want a 26-0 run and the game's over, right? I mean, 4 minutes in, you and I are looking at each other like, okay, this is done.
Yeah.
And they do a great job of that. And so, from some respects, like you say, you're like, oh, okay, here's another one. But I do think you have to give them credit for, having the guys prepared. Because honestly, coming out of that exhibition against Tennessee and then even Warner Pacific to a degree, I mean, obviously you beat Warner Pacific, you were going to beat them, but you didn't feel like, oh man, this team is sharp and dialed in and ready to go to start the season, But I thought North Florida, I mean, that stretch defense was really good. And, we talked about it. I mean, I thought you saw some pretty, bright spots. But yeah, I mean, the level of competition, you're kind of like, okay, you felt pretty good about winning the game. But.
Yeah, you always, those games are tough because everybody's, let's go play everybody, which we are going to get into, which Gonzaga does. But it's like also like, hey, man, if you have a team that's well constructed to make a deep run like we do every single year, you want some easier games to feel better, right? And I know, if you're a season ticket holder or you're somebody tuning in, it's like, well, it's not great for me, but it's like it's a marathon, not a sprint. You got to have certain, tune-up games, I guess, and people hate that about the NCAA, but also like that funds North Florida's program.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so on the flip side is they're more than happy to be like, come on and pound us on the head real quick. You know what I mean? Like whack-a-mole. So yeah, I mean, my thoughts were the same. Like, watching that Tennessee deal. You were there. I mean, you did the TV thing with the pay-per-view thing, which I thought you guys did a good job. Honestly, like I thought it was unique and different. I was like, oh, this kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And, but I was like, but then also you're like, it's an exhibition and Tennessee's good, and maybe sometimes there's certain guys that are not kind of ready for the moment, and you want that in an exhibition. Or we set it off air. It's like if that game's not on TV, like you just look and be like, oh, Gonzaga lost by 18, then you can just make something up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
they scored 54 in the first half and shot 50% from the field. And, just got away late, right? And nobody would even talked about it.
And nobody would have talked about it, but just hearing all the banter, afterwards, which you knew was going to happen. But then also it's like, so do you want to beat Tennessee by 15 and then be like, well, we're peaking at the right time, right? Because that's always the complaint that is not true. It's like, well, Gonzaga's not made for March. It's like, well, we've made the Sweet 16 since 2014.
Yeah.
Every year. I mean, we win games right?
Yep.
So yeah, anyway, just, finishing that thought is, North Florida was great. I thought it was kind of scary because they shot a lot of threes because you never know. And we say that on our broadcast all the time that teams that do that can maybe sneak up on you. Mm-hmm. You and I just got back from San Diego doing the Michigan State, the Carrier game. Mm-hmm. I know leading up to it, it was a complete pain in the ass for everybody at that university, and God bless them all that had to plan that thing. Mm-hmm. I thought it was a well-run gig, but we had the easy job of, not easy, I mean, you got to set up and stuff, but we just had to turn in our Social Security and make sure that we're not on some terror watch list, and we were cleared, but we didn't have to do that for 600 fans, and you know what I'm saying? Right. What was your initial thoughts of the whole process? Not then we'll get into like the game.
Sure. Mo, I thought it's funny. I had a bunch of people, even like going to school this morning and dropping off the kids, the teachers like, hey, how was it? And a lot of my friends, obviously, I'm sure as you as well, a lot of people have asked about it and talking about it. And, you talk about what it was a great experience. And I think to their credit, everybody, from the schools to, the Navy to, the people putting on the event. I mean, getting on the ship was relatively easy for us. Getting set up was easy. I go back to the Okinawa experience that we had, and we were told, hey, you're going to have this line, it's going to be set up, and everything's going to be good to go. And then you get in there, and it's not working, and there's nobody to help you. And then the stress is just magnified to, okay, we traveled 8,000 miles or whatever we did, and we're supposed to be broadcasting the game, and I'm not even sure if we're going to get the game on. Oh, the game's about to start. Why aren't we? You know, I mean, it was really stressful. I mean, it is when you're trying to do that. And for us to get on the ship and, you plug and play and you're ready to go, and everybody was very helpful. The military people were fantastic.
They were
I mean,
really
I
nice,
thought that it was great. Just the logistics of all of it, I thought ended up being great because we just didn't know. You'd be sending emails back and forth like, well, we think this is going to happen, or you might want to get on early because, and there were so many kind of moving parts to that deal. I thought they did a great job with it. And then, I don't know about for you, but even having a couple days now to relive it a little bit and just think how cool it was. I mean, what a great experience for us, right? I mean, for the teams, for the service people, for them to be able to see a game, and especially for the people who work on that ship, to be like, hey, this is pretty cool. We work here all the time. They just come back from like a 228-day deployment at sea.
That's insane.
Right. That is completely insane. Right. And for them to be able to see that, and, I mean, even like the flyby, right? Just get 2 helicopters and all those jets just come, boom, the fighters just go flying by. I mean, yeah, exactly.
That's pretty cool.
But I thought it was great. And, I don't know how often you would want to do that. Right, because of all of the factors that came into play that we'll talk about, but the experience and the uniqueness of the event and the opportunity, I mean, that's something I don't know about for you, but I'm going to remember that one for a long, long time.
Yeah, no, I was super excited. And I have to preface this, like, we're obviously support the troops, but if it was shitty, I would tell you, right? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Like, but it was smooth as you can get, like getting on and, how they had the food set up for the fans, and then once you got on the carrier, it was kind of a relaxed environment. It wasn't too crazy. It was still secure, but it wasn't like, hey, you can't walk over. You know what I'm saying? You kind of got to just be on the ship.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool because, sometimes...
Yeah, and you've got a jet sit right, the Blue Angel fighter sitting there, and then there's a helicopter there that you could kind of check out and see, and you even mentioned too, Mo, and I forgot, even just like the food trucks, right? They set up those 8 or 10 food trucks, and it was cool to see all the fans kind of congregating. It wasn't like we're in a city and everybody's kind of spread out a little bit. It was like all the fans were just like right there. It had a really good feel. It was cool.
Yeah, no, it was definitely neat. Yeah, I mean, just being on it, and then you don't realize the scale of one of those things until you're on them. And I know that's so cliche, but you walk and you're like, holy shit! Like, how many football fields long was it? 2,
it was like
maybe
3. It was over. That was almost 1,100 feet on that.
It's unbelievable, like how big that thing is, and you're just like, how much does it cost to run that? So I like to turn it on, And I think the number they gave us was $8.5 billion for the whole ship.
Yeah.
Was the cost.
Yeah. And then even think that 228-day deployment. I mean, right?
That's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah. I mean, it's remarkable.
What's the gas charge?
Yeah.
Right. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, to get into the game, I thought it was exactly how the game was going to play out. I thought the number before the game, 11.5, was huge.
Yeah.
Especially for a season opener. Michigan State always plays hard and plays physical. And they're always well coached, and they always have good players. You know what I'm saying? Like, usually it's a mix of 4-year guys, and then maybe 1 or 2 NBA guys, but it's like just solid players. So I thought that line was crazy. Not that I gamble on the games, and that's the truth, but I just sometimes, like, you look at the thing on ESPN and it says the line, you're just like, geez, man, that's it's a big one. So I thought the game played the way it was supposed to. And what I mean by that is low scoring, physical, and I mean, shooting was horrendous, but we have to be completely honest. Like, it was 50 degrees at best at the top end in the second half, don't you think, with the wind chill? I mean, being right on the water, and then it was breezy.
It was,
like,
and then it was crazy. That marine layer blew in, all of a sudden you look out and there's fog, you had been able to see everything behind you. Now it's foggy. And no, I agree with you. And it was funny if you would have had the opportunity when you're talking about that and expectations of winning and scores, and how many points are going to be scored. Michigan State always makes it hard.
Yes.
Right. In the first place. And then now I'm with you, once you got on the ship and after, having talked to Coach Few and to Brian Michelson, who had the scout, it's like, hey man, so how was it? It's like, hey, It was crazy out there. When they had practiced the day before, like the wind is real,
Yes.
right? Like the sun is real. And then all of a sudden you start thinking, okay, they're, to beat anybody by 12 or 15 or,
Yes.
18 points, and that was going to be really, really difficult. I mean, I think, and that's what I was saying, what a great experience. I know you want to do that a lot, because what is the true, take out of that? I mean, Julian isn't going to miss 2 or 3 threes by 2 feet.
And air ball backboards
yes.
and those, and like air balls happen, but like where it's a brick air ball, you're like, wow.
Right, and he had a couple shots, for both teams. I mean, Michigan State hit the side of the backboard a couple of times, which is jump shot. I mean, not threes. I mean, he was like, okay, it's a 12-foot jumper that hit the side of the, and you're just like, okay, there's some stuff going on here. And, even talking to Coach Few, he was joking. He said, hey, it's like a baseball game. He's like, there's like a left field sun. He's like, it's like you almost need a glove and a hat to be able to shade your eyes when you catch the
black
exactly
underneath.
eye black. And so I'm with you. Like, I don't think that it should have been any surprise that the game was low scoring and that it wasn't pretty. And I think I told you before the game, we were in the pregame show, talking to B-Mike, he went back and looked at the 2 games that had been played on aircraft carriers that had finished, because I think they had tried 4 before and 2 had been, condensation or whatever. They weren't able to finish them. But the winning teams went, I think, 1 for 12 from 3, which wasn't good, obviously, but they also didn't shoot a lot. And then I think 1 for 4 was the other game.
Yeah,
so,
where they just,
just
we're not
long range shooting
Yeah.
was just not gonna. wasn't gonna work.
I noticed in the second half there was a couple high ball screen actions, or like even on Julian, where they just went completely under.
Yep.
In which in any other scout you would never do that.
Yep.
And then it was like brick, but it was like, yeah, man, I would play 4 feet off.
Yep.
And take away the high low pass.
Yeah. And funny, right? Because that also completely played in Michigan State's game, right? Because
Yes.
if you were going to say that, like, okay, Gonzaga's going to play Michigan State and we're not going to shoot a lot of threes, you would 9 times out of 10 say Michigan State has a really good chance of winning this basketball game.
Yeah, it definitely changed the outlook of the game. Obviously, we won and came back and won, which was great. But it was like this number's crazy, and then if you were going to bet the over under, like you should have put the mortgage on the under. I mean, I think it was probably 150-ish or 148. It's like, dude, that's so. Anyway, again, this is not a gambling show, and we can't even gamble on the games, right? It's impossible. But the point is like when you're playing outside and you're playing in cold weather in the wind, it's like we're lucky we got in the 60s.
Yep.
I mean, honestly, and so we talked about it off air. Do you think this is the last Carrier game that they're ever going to do, period? I know it probably is for Gonzaga.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think it is interesting, right? Because, the experience, like I said, obviously is fantastic. What becomes interesting is, in March when you start breaking down seeding and, and all those things, how much it's a regular season game. So in theory, this should be counted as much as any other one. But then when you look at the circumstances, you kind of wonder, and even for both teams, the crazy thing for me was how competitive, not crazy, but it was so competitive and how much both teams really wanted to win that, it went beyond, okay, well, this is, it's outside and it's cold and it's whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, there was, it was really competitive. I mean, it felt like, a really high level game. So, I mean, you count it, right? Obviously, but it also was, and I think that's what you have to do. I would almost say, Mo, and what a great thing to be able to play it on Veterans Day, without a doubt. I mean, that added to the special feel of it. Maybe if you could, move the tip back. Now, obviously, the sun's going to be a little bit of a factor, but if you moved it to 1 o'clock, maybe, the wind isn't as bad
and it's
necessarily, and it's not as cold. You might be able to do that. We talked about it too. I mean, I love the idea of being on a base and maybe playing on a hanger, right? Where you're controlling the elements a little bit, and you still get the experience. I think that would be great. I mean, our trip to Okinawa in 2015 was unbelievable. I mean, that military experience and being around, and we were there obviously because we traveled so far a little bit longer, right? But I mean, you're sitting in the mess hall and you're eating with these, 18, 19-year-old kids who are, ready to go and serve and fight and die for you, and you're having a conversation with these kids, and just how impactful it is. For me as an adult, to see our players sitting there talking to these guys and maybe understanding a little bit better, like, it was really hard yesterday. Coach made us run a little extra, and then you're talking to a kid who's ready to go and like I said, give up his life. Or, I remember we sat there and they gave us some tours, there's a helicopter, like an attack helicopter, and they're, showing it to us and stuff. And you're talking to a 19-year-old who's in charge of this thing. That's, $100 million, whatever it was, piece of equipment. And he's, a year out of high school.
Yeah.
I mean, the experience, I think, can be fantastic. And I think the guys had a great time. And you talked to Coach Few. I mean, Brian Michelson was very moved, I think, just talking to him. I mean, they really felt that. I think it's a great deal to do.
Yeah.
Just the question is, can you play it outside consistently? I think there's a little bit of a question, but great experience.
No, I agree. Like, I think you should just do it in a hangar and then put, like F-18s or whatever around the court, so you have this cool backdrop, and then you don't have to worry about the weather. Obviously, you don't have to worry about the time slot, because the 1 o'clock, why it's at 3 or 3:30, because they want to get in a big time slot, which you get if you're ESPN. You're paying. They don't just let you come on there for free, right? You got to pay for the 1/100th thing of gas that goes into that thing, probably, or whatever, you know what I'm saying, just to get in there. But it was a great experience. It really was. And it obviously helps that Gonzaga won, but even if it didn't turn out that way, the game was high level. Like we said, getting on was cool, and just it was like more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be. I was excited for it, that I was waiting for, like, you can't walk over there, shut your mouth, and you got to be like, yeah, I know, but also I'm not going to do anything. You know what I'm saying? So, like, you're just waiting for that whenever you're in a military, and understandably, but also you're like, it's just, all right, man, chill, you know. You're just waiting for that. Overall, I thought it was fun, and it was bigger for Michigan State if they would have won. Yeah. So that's going to your point. Like, now this is what happens during the year. At least this is what we do inside the program. Is like we're going to be rooting for Michigan State the rest of the year to be good. Like, so then if they tank, you're like, so then it doesn't look as good. You know what I'm saying? So that's what's always the hardest part about some of these games that you schedule maybe a year in advance or 2 years in advance, and they're good 2 years ago. Michigan State's always good, but you get what I'm saying? Yep. And then they kind of have a drop, and then they're out of the top 25. You're like, man, now it's not as good for us in theory. But anyways, let's go on to our next opponent, Texas. What was the score last year? We beat them by like 25,
we ended
30?
We ended up winning by like 12.
But we were up 25.
We were up by 25, and it was not competitive from the get-go, honestly. I mean, it was... and there was so much hype about Texas coming into that thing, right? And it was interesting because, now the stuff that you're reading now is, hey, remember last year, a brand new coach, he'd come, Coach Beard had been at Texas Tech, and if you know anything about Texas, that's where I'm from, right? Like, those people were fired up mad that he wouldn't stay at Texas Tech because he had built it and they were rolling, and for him to go and take the Texas job, you're right, but that's, it would almost be like...
Fewy taking the UW job or something.
If he went and did that tomorrow, and then multiply that times 3 or 4. There's a fire down there. There just is, from that loyalty perspective. And then, he's getting settled in. Remember, they had all those transfers. They had 5 guys that were like high level D, or like Power 5 transfers that came in, and they were going to be really good. Well, we got them before they were able to figure anything out. And and Drew had a huge game, obviously, which was awesome. So, the Zags got after him in a hurry last year. And now it's going to be interesting to see because they still have some of those guys. Yep. They got it figured out a little bit, down the stretch and ended up, having a 20-win season. So, and I would imagine there's going to be some fire down there after what happened last year for sure.
I think playing in their new home building. What's the name of the center again?
Moody Center.
Moody Center. It's $300 million or something like that. You said. So opening a brand new building, obviously number 2 team coming in into play, and then what happened last year. It's going to be a great atmosphere. Texas is number 5 in scoring defense. Chris Beard is normally well known. That's his bread and butter is their defensive prowess, and it's more of a scheme thing for me. Obviously, guys play hard, but he downs all side ball screens. So the people listening, if you're getting a side ball screen, he's going to force you to the baseline side almost to where he lets you go, not straight line, but you ain't getting to the middle. And then you preload on that side, which I always think is different to play against, because if your guards can't make 16 to 12 footers consistently, it makes it difficult, or you can't throw that skip pass on the weak side because they preload on the split line. So that for me, like the style wise, is going to be interesting to see how they combat that from a Gonzaga standpoint. We've done well against it last year, obviously. Got our asses kicked in 2019. I'm just talking styles.
Yeah.
When he was at Texas Tech, because again, it makes it difficult. Normally you run all your stuff going to the middle, or then you do your dribble drives and handoffs and back doors. And when you're forced baseline, it does lure you into, this is a good shot. And there's a contest, but you're at 12 feet, which guys don't practice very much, or you're at 16 and you end up taking tough contested twos. So going into that game, I want to get your thoughts, like style wise, they play small. We obviously have Drew is basically our inside scoring presence, our only one so far.
Yep.
How do you think that game's going to go?
Right.
True road game. We haven't played a true road game
haven't.
in a long time.
Yeah.
It feels like, right?
Yeah.
Besides conference, but I'm talking.
Yeah, no, it is. It's going to be interesting because they are going to be, nuts. I mean, that building, I was looking at it a little bit, and I think 3/4 of that bottom level is students. So they've got a horseshoe kind of going around them. It's going to be loud. It's going to be crazy just from that standpoint, right? Because that adds to when you talk about that defense and getting in your and out, right? You've played in the road. Stuff's going crazy around you. And maybe you don't make the decisions that coach wanted you to make when you were at shoot around 5 hours prior. It's like, oh wait. I think it is going to be hard. And then, another thing, Chris Beard's teams, you talk about style, but also, style just from a physical standpoint, like we saw against Michigan State. I mean, they're going to get in there. They're going to be handsy. They're going to be, it's like, I dare you to blow the whistle.
Yeah. No,
and you have to fight through that physical play, and you have to be not just physically tough, but mentally tough. Because remember the Texas Tech game when he was there, when we played him, it's like, okay, it's like, I just caught the ball in the post. I had two guys grab my arms, and the ball disappeared, and they went the other way, and nobody blew a whistle. So I think that you have to be ready for that aspect of it too, and playing through that stuff, right? And being strong enough to, okay, guy maybe got your arm. If the whistle's not going to blow, you've got a choice. You can fight through that and keep going, or you can look around and kind of complain about it a little bit, right? And I don't know that they had it that much last year when we played them, but that was kind of what those Tech teams were really built on, right?
They were
I think that'll be a part of it too.
Yeah, built on toughness, and then you really have to, understand the, when you go on the road, they'll claim it's not, but you do get a different whistle.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this off air before, like, people always kind of in the business or, around college basketball be like, oh, we got Krzyzewski tonight. We're talking about Mike Krzyzewski, who just retired from Duke, and he was really good with officials. And, if you watch Duke games, not just Duke, but like Carolina, if they're playing, but like would get more calls. Yep. Do you think anybody says that about Fewy, on the opposite side?
There are probably 9 teams in the WCC.
That would be like, well, we got Fewy tonight, right? And why I'm bringing that? Because it's a true road game. Mm-hmm. So I wonder, we get to Texas and the crowd starts roaring. Those guys are humans too. Yep. And they go, well, that wasn't a travel. It's a layup and one. Right. Texas goes up 6, what I mean? And the crowd's going. I mean, they like that deal. Yeah. So again, that's going to be interesting for me because we have guys that are obviously good players, but are stepping into bigger roles, right? Yeah. And obviously the first episode of season 2 is, during going with the season of Gonzaga. So, Nolan Hickman, he's playing bigger minutes and he's replacing an NBA player, Andrew Nembhard, who was fantastic for us and never flashy, never, jumped out on the screen. But like if you watch how he played, it was just ball screen cover, ball screen reads 95%, he got an A+ on it. Yep. You know what I'm saying? He could shoot. Mm-hmm. He was really good inside. His layup package was good. And then he was good defensively, good size and all that stuff. So it's like, okay, Nolan, you got an opportunity to replace that, but he only played 11 minutes last year. Yep. And then you bring in Malachi Smith in, new player from Chattanooga, scored big time for them, 21 a game. Yep. But what's it like coming off the bench, or what's it like when every time down? And I played in this system, and it changed for me when I went to the NBA. It's like, oh, the ball's not thrown to you every single time, and it's not. Right. It's sometimes hard to get in a rhythm. You know what I'm saying? So what's that like? And I think he's been good. He was good in North Florida. He wasn't great on the carrier, but we kind of throw out the individual stats shooting wise, as we talked about. Yeah. And then Hunter Silas for me is like, Okay, so how are these perimeter players going to handle that type of situation?
Well, and Mo, I agree with that. And then you add in, we talked about those transfers. Well, those guys are back, right? I mean, Carr is back, Smith is back, the Bishop kid, I know he's the transfer from Creighton. But I mean, you got, two guys who are veterans who were all league players at their previous stops who came in and competed in the Big 12. And so, that adds to the element, too, is not just, okay, we're going to this hostile environment and these guys haven't been in major roles in those situations before. And even Malachi, who's, in his, fourth year of college basketball. I mean, we talked to him. He said, hey, I maybe played one of those games a year, right? And so now it's, you're walking into that thing where you're going against guys who have, 100 games, 100-plus games with this COVID and guys getting maybe an extra year. They've got a lot of experience. And so that's going to be interesting to watch and see how those guys, kind of figure it out. And going back to, like you say, okay, so we played North Florida. How did that go? And we talk about why you play those games. Well, you need to develop. You need, right?
Amen.
Nolan and Hunter need to have some success in their roles. Okay, you're going to be the starting point guard. You're going to play 28, 30 minutes a game. You need to have some success, be able to throw the right pass, be able to make the right decision versus, even in the Michigan State game, you watch Nolan and there were times where, he was just, look, Michigan State was really good and big and physical and, Nolan hasn't been in that spot.
He was out of sorts. I mean, let's just be honest. And we're on this show, we can say those type of things. And it's not like, we're protecting the kid, but it was like he was out of sorts. He didn't play the last 10 minutes of the game because he didn't look very good for stretches. Yeah. Now, I've said it on the radio, and I don't know if I've said it on this podcast last year, but I'd really believe the kid has an opportunity to be really good. High-level recruit that was signed at Kentucky from Seattle. You can see all the intangibles or whatever you want to call it athletically, but you have to make simple plays. And so, this is going to be a great test for him to kind of get back in the good graces. I know we're 2 games in, but as my point is like come in, hit the right guy. Yep. Make your right reads on your ball screens, and then use what you got to go get 12 to 16. Yeah.
And and in his defense, right, we go back to the aircraft carrier game again. You're packed in, and you're right. So now, all of a sudden, what kind of stuff's going to open up? You make that right pass, you throw it into Drew, they double. Now everybody's moving and stuff's going on, and now maybe you've got more space to operate it. But we knew going into that thing, it's like we're going to try to stop Drew. We're going to pack in, like you said, we're going under on screens on guys that shoot 45% from three. It makes no sense. If you were playing a traditional basketball game, they never would have done it. So it will be interesting to see how Nolan, when you get in a little more, okay, you've got to make a decision. I'm going to throw it into Drew. Is he going to score 30 on you again, or are you going to double him? Now the ball starts moving. So it'll be interesting to see, and hopefully he's able to bounce back a little bit. Because I'm with you. I think he's got a chance to be really good. But it's hard. I think we've become so accustomed to, we're so spoiled, and that guys have been able to come in and it just kind of has seamlessly moved along. Yeah. And sometimes you haven't had that situation where, okay, look, it's going to take a little while to figure it out. Yeah. Right? And we've just been... so just, okay, well, the next guy came in and he, and Andrew, he'd already played a lot of basketball, right? And then you had Jalen come in. He's a, once in a lifetime type of a guy. And then, Kevin obviously came in and played a lot right away. But, I think a lot of times too, Mo, with that, and you look over the years, there have been a lot of kind of lead guards that you've played with, right? Like, so there's been a point guard and then a guy who's been maybe a little secondary, they go all the way back. Let's go to Dan and Blake, and and Matt and Q, and you go through, and Rabbit and Pargo, right? You kind of go through where, okay, you were the understudy, but the understudy was also getting quite a few minutes. last year, you really leaned on Andrew. Minutes. So hopefully this is just learning curve stuff for him, because I'm with you. I think he's got a chance. It's 2 games in, right? Yeah,
no, exactly. But we again, part of the show is, people want to hear our thoughts. Sure. No,
absolutely.
On where, and again, I think he has a fantastic opportunity to step into that role, but now, it's trial by fire, right? Is the point. And you're exactly right. Yeah. Even when Jalen came in, Andrew was ready, but he got to play off the ball. Yeah. But he still played 25 minutes a night, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was bring the ball up the floor. Yeah, bring the floor. Yeah, exactly. And kind of be hey, it's Jalen, you need a break or whatever, what I'm saying? And it would, the pressure wasn't on. So again, the biggest takeaway for me going into this Texas game is contrasting styles defensively. I talked about icing all the side ball screens and switching a lot, all those actions, playing really physical, which Texas does, a la what Texas Tech did, Chris Beard's style. and then how are our guys are going to, perform in a true road environment. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, the next episode after the game, I'll talk about that. But I think going into it, it's like that's something that people should be aware of. It's like this is a true road game that's going to be a little bit nasty, which are fun. But those guys haven't played in those. Usually it's a neutral or it's, we're playing Santa Clara, and then it's not, we love Santa Clara. It's fun to go down there, but it's not the same thing. So, right? I mean, so let's get into Kentucky on Sunday.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think I'm really happy that they did the 6-game deal.
Awesome.
I think it's awesome for our fan base. It's awesome for our season ticket holders. It's awesome for the Kentucky program too, because just perception. Gonzaga is a 4-year guy, even though it's not anymore. But it kind of you have that aspect going against each other, like the one and dones versus the classic program.
Yep.
Even though it's not the same, but you get my point. What's your thoughts on us not being able to play in the kennel? Because I played in the arena, and if fans listening now, when's the last time we played in the arena?
Well, that's what I'm trying to remember,
Same
and
here.
I should be able to because we were supposed to.
Did we play Wazoo,
presumably in
one
the
of those?
tournament, the COVID year.
Okay,
that would have been when we did, or when we would have. But I'm trying to remember back.
Was it Memphis with Cal? Or did we play Wazoo one time?
Yeah, I think we did in between there. I should know the answer to this, but I haven't gotten that far ahead.
But I think it was like 13 or 14.
It's been a little while.
It
has been
almost 10 years,
Yep.
8 to 10 years. And, just to be frank, like Fewey's always not liked playing in that venue, even though it sells out and it's great for the other fans that can't get tickets, but it's a shitty shooting venue, not a shitty venue at all.
Right.
As far as like concerts and, I'm just being real. Like Spokane
fan,
Arena is cool,
Yep.
but like playing there is tough.
Yeah.
I played there obviously in high school, and then we played there a couple times. My sophomore, junior, or freshman and sophomore year, we'd always play like Eastern. And we'd barely beat them when we should have beat the crap out of them.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
It's just always, so he always had some anxiety, and rightfully so, playing in that spot. So like, are you, obviously you're excited about the game, but are you a little upset that it's there and not?
Yeah, right. I mean, I think you're obviously upset that didn't happen. The good news is the last game in the series is supposed to be played in the kennel.
Oh, okay.
Cal is going to be, we kind of laugh about it. At that point he'll be 69. Who knows if he's still coaching and who knows somebody. But as of now, the last game of that series will be played in the kennel, which is great. I mean, Look, I understand everyone's frustration. I feel that frustration too. And I think all you have to do is go back to Michigan State when Tom Izzo brought Draymond Green in here in 2011. Mm-hmm. Right? It was that atmosphere in the kennel was great. And I've told this story a million times, but I remember before the game started, Coach Izzo walked out of the tunnel and just looked around, and you could just see him mouth just like, wow. Right? I mean, the place was hopping. It was as good an atmosphere as we've ever had in there. And for me, what a great thing, right? What a great experience and great for college basketball, right? When the game's being shown on TV and the highlights are being shown, and then after the fact, I actually saw there was a podcast that Draymond Green does that he was talking to Coach Izzo, and they talked about that game. Right. And I'm not sure they would have been talking about it with the same fire if it would have been played in a neutral site, if it would have been played at the arena. So,
no question.
From my standpoint, it would be great just, for college basketball, that arena, that setting. Coach Cal, I laugh. I go back and tell this story when he was at Memphis. It was kind of the same thing. We were trying to set that series up. He's like, we'll play you downtown Spokane. We'll, play you downtown Memphis. And Coach was like, wait a second. He's like, hey, we're playing an NBA arena. And it's like, that's also your home arena. That's where Memphis plays. And the Grizzlies deal.
FedEx Forum.
The FedEx Forum, yeah, so it's kind of funny. But that was the way to get the deal done. And that's how Coach Cal is, right? I mean, he's been around. He's done a lot of stuff. And he and Coach Few, I know, are good friends. And I think, to be able to get it done, I would rather play downtown and have this 6-year series, be able to get them. They'll be at the Battle in Seattle in a few years.
Good point.
To be able to get them in than to have it fall apart on that. And I'll say this, Mo, I agree with you. I don't know that, the shooting part of it and the the level of play hasn't always been great. It is
it's just awkward.
It is awkward. But my thing, I've been trying to tell the fans that have complained about it, where it's like, hey, you got a choice. You can sit around and groan and moan about the fact that it ain't being played at the Kennel, or you can make Veterans Memorial Arena as good as the Kennel.
Yeah,
like for one game, like you get into it and you get going. And I mean, the best way to show somebody that you're mad at what they did is going to whoop them, right? So you say, hey, Coach Cal, that's fine. You don't want to place in the Kennel. We still beat you anyway, right? So hopefully the fans are able to turn that into a really good, home court advantage.
Yeah,
for the Zags.
I think it's a fantastic matchup, even no matter what happens in the Texas game. I think the biggest individual matchup is that Shibwe,
yep.
Shibwe versus Timmy. Both inside, scoring presence.
Yeah.
Probably the best players in college basketball, 2 preseason All-Americans, all that jazz. I think that's going to be a fantastic individual matchup to see.
And the thing with Shibwe is, he's been banged up a little bit. I don't think he didn't play in their first 1 or 2, right? A knee, but I'm sure they're
going to get him ready for.
Yeah, I'm with you, and that's what's been weird about this whole thing, isn't it? Like, for as much as it's been the talk about Kentucky and Gonzaga, it seems to me more of the chatter has been, why aren't we playing in the Kennel versus. This is one of the marquee matchups. I mean, the National Player of the Year last year against the National Preseason Player of the Year the last 2 years. I mean, the two bigs, we all talked about all offseason how great it is to have these 2 seniors back, in Shibwe and Timmy, and how much fun is that going to be to see Drew go against him. And we saw them when he was at West Virginia. The COVID year, we played him in Indianapolis before the game against Baylor got canceled. And Shibwe was on Coach Huggins' team that year, and Drew got the better of him. He definitely was not the player. I mean, he blossomed at Kentucky under Coach Cal. I mean, he really came into his own, obviously, and became the player of the year. But yeah, I think I'm with you, man. I mean, that's going to be the most fun that there is. And it seems like to me, and maybe it's because you still have Texas. It's a top 10, top 12 team. Maybe it's because Kentucky still has Michigan State. They're going to play them before they come here. But I'm with you. I mean, how about that matchup? That's going to be fun as heck to watch.
It's going to be a great matchup. Yeah. Those 2 guys are obviously fantastic players, and I like watching individual matchups. Since this is an in-season podcast, I think this is an issue that we have to bring up, and I don't think it's terrible to bring it up, and I don't think some of the fans realize it, but like, do you get scared? I know your answer, but we have to go through the semantics of it. Is like, do you get scared every time that we've had some of these games? And again, I'm not going to side with some of these dumbass fans or like, we should win by 25. Oh, what the hell? But like, we are kind of shitting our pants for a little bit, and then we throw it to Drew, and then he goes on a run. This happened against Michigan State.
Yep.
Happened in the tournament against Memphis last year, where he makes a magical, basically, like, come on, fellas.
Yep.
Can't keep doing that.
No.
And it's kind of scary. And it's not a knock on the coaching, but it's at some point, it's like, hey, man, somebody else has got to, go get 20.
Yeah.
And because if I'm, especially against Michigan State, playing outside, all the stuff we just talked about, I'm double teaming him every time he touches the ball. And I'm letting you swing, and take your chances from downtown. So, like, how afraid are you, just as a guy who calls the games and a fan of, that you can't, like you said, you can't keep going to the well.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and it's right. It's one of those things. I'm sure for Coach Few and talking to B Mike after the game, it's like to have that in your back pocket. That it's like, hey, Drew can, right? I mean, it's unbelievable. It's like when you were playing, right? Like, okay, we're struggling. Mo knocks down 1 or 2 shots. He might go and get 50, and we're going to win this game, right? I mean, it's a great thing to have. But like you said, at some point, some other guys are going to have to make some plays, because you're going to run into a game where somebody can slow Drew down, where you are going to double him, or he is going to miss a few of those shots. I mean, what he did against Memphis, we're probably not going to see again.
No,
I mean, the shots he was making, it was out of body, all time.
Yeah, all time NCAA tournament performance.
It was phenomenal. It was unbelievable. But to have that expectation, well, we can just throw it to Drew and he's going to start doing that again. Or for the fans to think, okay, this is just going to automatically, if we're struggling, he can carry the team. You're going to need somebody else to help him. You're going to need it to be able to, okay, we throw it in there, he gets doubled, he can kick it back out, we can knock down a 3. Now they have to think about it, right? You're in that comeback. It's like, okay, now what do we do? Are we going to double again? Because, he just hit that shot, or he just hit that shot. How are we going to handle this? Now you feed it in Drew. Now we can go to work again, right? But I'm with you. I think, getting to a point where, every second half, you just kind of expect that, well, it's okay, we can just throw it to Drew. We're struggling, and it's going to work for us.
No.
I think that a couple of those guys are going to have to figure it out and play. And look, I mean, we know Rasheer can knock down shots, and we know that Julian, can knock down shots. I think, too, Mo, we do have to remember a little. We've talked about this quite a bit. Is new roles for everybody, including Julian, right? And when you go from people aren't talking to you at the beginning of the year to, you move up from 5th or 6th on the scouting report to maybe 3rd or 4th, to now you move up to
second or 3rd,
right? Now all of a sudden, hey, there's a little more pressure. There's some stuff's going on. So I do think that we've got guys who can definitely kind of step forward and do that. But to your point, you're not making shots, and all of a sudden you just think, okay, well, that's all right. We're just going to go in here. You don't want to do it too many times, right? You go to the well too much, and you're going to get burned.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. Like it's a real concern, and again, like it's coming from a place that's just logical. I guess it's like it's not a knock on any of the other guys. It's not a knock on their style, but it's like, fuck, we get down 12, and then Drew goes for an 8-0 run, and then we're back in the game. It's like, what if he stubs his toe or whatever, or gets a 4th foul on a cheap, ball screen coverage or something? You know what I'm saying? And then it's like, man, so like these lapses in efficiency, and I know the season's early, but we're taking it as a whole from last year, because this is mainly last year's team. Besides Andrew, everybody else is kind of the same. You know what I'm saying, as far as production and what's on the floor. It's kind of scary. So, and again, I think guys can move into those roles where they're scoring more and knocking down shots, but it gets where it's like, hey man, like at some point. Especially for inside players, it's harder to get on the ball. The ball's not touching their hands. It's harder, it's easier to double team. Other guys have to be able to go get 12, 14, 16, 18 to take that load off and pressure off.
And as we've seen, Tumo, in those games, those physical games, right, where all of a sudden, okay, you're getting bumped off and not right, so now all of a sudden you feed it in there. And
his post catch is at 18 instead of 12. It's a big difference. And now he's got to make 3 or 4 dribbles, and then now the help can pre-rotate and wall up on his his jump hooks and stuff like that. And he makes a ton of them, but it's also hard to ask a guy. It's like, hey, go do that every single time. We'll bail you out. And it's like, that's kind of what I'm going to be watching as the season progresses is who's going to step up. There's plenty of great candidates. It's not what I'm not saying there isn't, but like who's going to step up into that secondary scoring role consistently to where if he has 14 one night, we're not biting our nails at the end of the game. And I think that's a legitimate concern and legitimate thought to have going into this Gonzaga season.
And you and I have talked about it too. I think even with the bigs to a degree, right? So you get into a game and you have ridden Drew a little bit, right? He gets on a little bit of a run, but now he's gassed, and you look at it and you're like, okay,
he's tired,
or like you said, or there's some foul trouble. If Efton can continue to come along, I've loved his energy. I mean, obviously he's figured out how to play without fouls. You can put him in there and he can make a shot. Maybe you're not throwing it into him, first touch like Efton, go score it, but hey, maybe he's the 2nd or 3rd option. He catches it and he's able to score. Anton can Anton can score a couple of buckets for you down low and even help from that standpoint. I know you're talking about outside scoring and secondary. Kind of getting some other guys to score. But I even think, I'm going to kind of watch that part of the development of Anton. So I thought Anton actually, defensively in both games has been good. I thought against North Florida, he played well.
He was great in that Michigan State game. He didn't take a field goal attempt. But I thought there were stretches where defensively he was good. He had some nice lead passes, and that's kind of his game. So but also it's like, well, Anton, you've gotten a lot better. And you've shown that you can score. Like, we need 6 to 10 out of you. So 0 field goal attempts. I'm like, come on, man. Just, to kind of be selfish a little bit. And that's not a knock. It's like you've shown that you've improved. So you need to go get 6 to 10 and mix that in with your 4 steals and your 8 rebounds and a chart. All that stuff.
All the stuff he does
is important. But, anyway, I hate just knocking guys for not scoring because that's not what I'm doing.
But
then it's also like, well, you didn't play fucking defense once in your life. I'm like, yeah, touche. You know what I'm saying? So I get it. But it's like, 0 field goal attempts, man. I'm like, come on, man, just be selfish.
Like,
Take a
like,
step back.
I was
Who
like, how is
cares?
that possible?
I know.
How could you step onto a basketball court?
My daughter just did that once in the game, just 0 field goal attempts. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, it didn't present itself. I'm like, are you sure you're my kid? It's just crazy, man. Like, if I got in the car and I had like 12 when I was like 12 years old, it'd be a bad car ride. Right. That's how different our upbringings were basketball wise. But I'm just whatever. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that kind of covers it, man. I kind of wanted to go over your expectations, but we've kind of, covered that to a sense. I think this is a 1 to 3 seed team. I know that sounds funny, but I think we have a chance to be as dominant as we've been in the past. But then also it's logically there's plenty of opportunity for guys to not play as good as Andrew Nemhard last year. You know what I'm saying? Right. Like we talked about, and we'd still be great. But the 1 seed streak or whatever could be over, which is perfectly fine. Yep. Because we laugh at some people that complain. And this is a whole nother episode. Now, maybe I'll get in. Maybe I'll do that's going to be, I'm going to do an episode where it's the constant complaints I hear or that I know that are out there about Gonzaga basketball, and then I'll just refute them with facts. Right. Or I'll just fucking rant the whole time. Right. I will, because I get like people have a right to have an opinion, but also it's like, hey man, if you're a 3 seed and you won your conference or whatever, and you're 29 or let's say 27-5, it's a pretty good year. Yeah. Okay, and let's get excited for the tournament. Yeah. Like we still got a chance to do this thing. Yeah,
for sure.
So what do you think your expectations are?
Mo, I do think a couple things. I think I expect us to get a lot better. Right, this is going to be one of those years where you don't know. Like this team's got a chance to be a lot better. Right, there are years where you come in, and even last year to a degree. Yeah, where you're like, okay, I know this is what we're going to be. Yeah, right, ceiling, and I think this group has that chance to start growing and keep growing and be better, like much better in March than it is today. I also think like when you look around, and obviously same deal, it's very early, but some of the games that I've watched, I haven't seen a ton, but a little bit, you don't have the feeling that there are a lot of like dynamic teams out there, right? It feels like to me there are probably 10, 15 really good teams right now, but there's nobody that jumps out. You're like, okay, that is the surefire favorite to win the national championship, right? So, I think that it's maybe going to be a little bit different year, which still serves us great because we're in that 10 to 15, group of I just think it's going to be a different team, right? I don't know, especially over the last few years where there have been some really dynamic players, right? And Drew is dynamic in his own way. But when you talk like, Chet, there was a lot of energy around that. Jalen, you're like, again, different level, kind of athlete. Rui and Corey. And, you go back over the last 5 or 6 years, you felt.
BC.
Yeah, BC,
exactly.
You're
just like, oh God. He's going to make a lot of money.
Exactly. and it's not bad. It's just a little bit different. So it's going to have a little different feel, and it's going to take a little while to kind of sort itself out. But I feel like we're in a good spot because, like I said, there aren't, 1 or 2 or 3 teams like, okay, like, man, they got a chance to run the table. They're going to be really good. I don't know if I want to see them in the NCAA tournament. Tennessee lost to, we played them, in the exhibition. We know about they lost to Colorado the other night, who lost on opening night. I forget who they lost to, but it wasn't a good loss for Tad Boyle's club. And then, Colorado turns around and beats Tennessee by 12. And we saw Tennessee. We thought Tennessee was, a pretty solid team, So I think there's going to be maybe a little more parity this year, at least early on. It's like, let me adjust that when we talk later. But right now it feels like, and we're right in that mix. And it's a pretty good place to be. Yeah. Right?
No, that's a very good point. Like I didn't even think about the growth aspect, which we like as, guys that call the games and follow the teams. It's nice to see, especially when kids, and I talked about it in the first season when we had Joel and Corey. It's fun to see guys grow and grow into roles. I think that's perfectly on the table for Nolan Hickman. It's for Hunter Silas, even Malachi to a certain extent. I know he's a transfer, but it's like, hey man, this is brand new to you, and you want to play at the next level, and you get buckets, so go get buckets, but do it off the bench, and you got to be a little bit more concise with your ball handling and all that stuff. So I think it's a very good point. In years past, obviously, there's always room to grow. So whoever's listening, like, you don't think it's like no, like the certain ceilings for players doesn't mean they're bad. It's just like that's kind of what he is. You maybe squeeze 2% more. I think there's 10% more out of some of these guys, which is a lot. especially like a Hunter and a Nolan, that if they continue to work on their games and improving, it can really elevate this team. So yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's good to see you. It's
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's not as fun as it was last time, but yeah, we got on a little bit of a roll.
We did. That was. I mean, it was 7 IPAs deep, and
yeah, that was fun. Yeah,
thank God for Brendan, my producer, but I rambled. I think I asked you the same thing twice in a row after we had a mandatory bathroom break.
Yeah, that was a good one.
And you were like looking at me like, I just answered all these questions, you moron. But
no, actually, it was like, I don't know when to ask if I can get a break because I got to go.
Yeah, there's a lot of slur at the end of that episode, but it was fun, man. We had a good time.
No, this was great too, man. This is awesome. Anytime.
So yeah, again, appreciate you coming on, and thanks for listening. Whoever's listening, season 2, episode 1 of The Perimeter. I forgot the whole name of my show. It's The Perimeter. But thank you to all our sponsors, and tune in next week.
Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Turn up the 10. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's do it again.
The Perimeter with Adam Morrison is produced independently and locally in Spokane, Washington by Spokast Studios. Our city, our stories. Visit www.spokast.com to learn more about how you can start your very own podcast today. The Perimeter with Adam Morrison is presented by Owens Farms Piedmontese and supported by the Lish Hamburgers and the Spokane Workers Co-op. Thank you to Jinx Universe and Position Music for letting The Perimeter use the song Let's Do It Again from Jinx's album Make It Look Good.